Hello, everybody. How's everybody doing today? Hello, hello. It's always hard for me to know when I'm actually live versus when things are kind of loading up. So I'm just going to roll for a minute here and see if there's a. Okay, hi. I think I'm actually live right now. And super excited to be with you today. My name is Crispina French, and I am a textile recycling entrepreneur, artist, activist. I'm all about racial justice. I just heard this new term this past week. It's called intersectional environmentalism, and it was coined by a young woman whose name I don't remember at the moment, but I'll try to remember it and post it in the comments. Basically, it just speaks to being an environmentalist and considering the human aspect of our environment and nurturing our well-being on the planet while also caring for our environmental, like nature around us. And I never realized that there was a separation between the two, but I've always been really focused on, the fair treatment, the nurturing, the empowerment of all the people who have helped me in my process over the years, and then all the people who serve my existence in the world. So from people who manufacture the socks that I wear to the people who grow my food. So I'm an intersectional environmentalist. And I will post, if you Google that term, I think you'll come up with some pretty interesting details about that new kind of awareness out there. It's pretty exciting. So this is day number 22 in a 30-day series all about creative textile recycling. And at heart, I'm an artist, I'm a maker, and I'm an environmentalist. And for the first 21 days, I think we've spent a lot of time talking about different techniques, introducing you guys to different ideas and processes about, that use discarded clothing to make something awesome and fun and useful. So today we're going to actually do some making, and I kind of sprung this on you without a whole lot of notice, so I bet that there's not a whole lot of you guys sitting around with a pile of fabric in front of you with all your sewing tools, but if this is of interest, you can always come back to it and dive into the process. So I put in the description of today's episode just a little bit about what I do this time of year. So this time of year is really, I love the summer. I love gardening. I love eating really healthy food. And I do the best that I can to preserve the bounty while it's fresh. I like to eat organically. I like to feed my family well from our garden. And you know how it is. We always have extra in the summer. And so in the winter, it's nice to have the reminder of that bounty on our dinner table and in our refrigerator. So actually, what I do a lot of canning, and I make applesauce, pear sauce, peach sauce, and I also do jams and jellies. And I don't eat sugar, which is I highly recommend it if anybody is kind of like high energy and anxiety ridden. Sugar seems to really exacerbate those two. When I say high energy, I don't mean like upbeat and positive. I mean like kind of buzzy, like a bee, kind of bzz, always running around doing like more things than seem possible. And the other thing, it's interesting. I took a course years ago with a food kind of guru, and something like sugar and meat. Okay, I'm vegan and I don't eat sugar. So sugar, the history of the sugar trade is actually really, and it continues today. People who work making sugar are very awesome. I mean, very often, not, they probably are awesome as well, but they're very often mistreated. The slave trade was actually a lot of the sugar, rum, and things that like sugar products were made by slaves. And today that, not technically slaves make sugar, but people who live in places where their labor is not valued like it should be. So when you eat sugar, you're kind of perpetuating that type of production. And some people believe that when you promote that kind of negativity in the world, that you're actually um, embodying that somehow. So if you, same thing with meat, like if you eat meat, like most people eat meat, and my family eats meat, and I'm not against people who eat meat, but I feel like a lot of meat in the kind of factory farms that you can read about, a lot of the animals that are butchered for their meat are very fearful when they die. They are like in the state of like, holy crap, oh my god, I'm gonna die. And then that chemical is released in their system and it's eaten when you eat the meat. So if you eat meat or sugar, try to find brands or businesses that manufacture that kind of thing with grace and thought, so that you can really promote things that are just good in the world. I don't really know how I got off on that tangent. Oh, sugarless jam. Yeah, so I use apple cider. It's actually apple juice concentrate to sweeten the preserves that I make. And Carolyn, you're there. Hello, honey. Carolyn was asking me about recipes. So I don't have the recipe in my head, but I use something called Paloma's pectin, and it's a company that makes pectin that you can use with no sugar, and for making jams. And I just use a recipe that's on the insert in the box. So Paloma's pectin is the brand name, and you can buy it on, I bought it on Amazon in the past, although you can probably buy it directly from Paloma's pectin company, which would probably be a more socially minded thing to do. Okay, so let's get busy. So I'm telling you this whole big long story about how I like to preserve food, and the reason is that today's kind of little mini workshop came about is because when you're canning and preserving and making all kinds of food for later in the year, you need pot holders. And there's a really simple little technique that I use to make a pot holder, and I'm going to show you that right now. So I have 3 different squares, and I have them kind of prepped ahead of time, so the colors might be a little different. But this is a piece of wool blanket. You can use a piece of wool blanket, you can use a piece of sweater, you can anything, but you want it to be kind of cushy, like thick. And if it's not, if you only have fabric that's not very thick, you can use a couple different layers. Then I have a square that's cut out of this. I cut this t-shirt, I cut the sleeve off, and I made a square. I used it's a 7-inch square, so I just used the first square I cut as a pattern piece and cut that out. And then I have this other amazing scrap fabric that's from my friend Mimi, who I've talked about before in my series. She's an upholsterer, and she's really not a real upholsterer. She's an upholstery crafts person with artistry. She uses artistry in her trade, and she makes the most incredible stuff. So all of her fabrics are just like super delicious and really pricey and beautifully made. So I'm using a piece of her scrap. So what I did is I layered those 3 pieces together. So you can see there's the t-shirt, there's the scrap from Mimi, and then in between those 2 layers is the wool. And I like to put wool on the inside of smoother fabric because wool is kind of fuzzy. And when you're cooking, you really don't want fuzz near your food because it gets in there, and then, you're pulling fuzz out of your mouth. So if you're using a fuzzy or kind of like fluffy type of fabric, try to layer that in between fabrics that are more smooth. Okay, then you're going to take your embroidery needle, and I've talked about the tools that I use in my making process in previous episodes, but embroidery needles are available in my shop, and I sell them in packs of 5. Then they come in a cool little needle book, which this is like the inside of the needle book. I can show you. This is a pack from like the assortment that I sell, and this is all packaged in a super cute little envelope, which I don't have right in front of me, but nevertheless, you can purchase these in my shop if you need them. Any kind of needle will work just fine as long as you can thread embroidery floss through it. And then speaking of embroidery floss, this is my little kit of embroidery floss that I sell as well in my shop. And the envelope kind of matches the envelope that I was talking about that has the needle books in it, or yeah, the needles in it. And inside of here, there's like a little needle keeper. So it's a piece, so you can keep in the flosses inside here, but you can put your needle right here if you want to keep it that way. Okay, so then you can pick your floss. I have a bunch of different colors here that are from my summer palette that you can also find in my shop. And my shop is located at crispina.com. And been having a little trouble with the technology back end of things with my shop. So if you're not seeing a product that you're looking for, pop me a message and I'll be sure to help you with that. At any rate, the summer palette for 2020 has all these really bright, pretty colors. And I have my needle all threaded up. So what I do, so I'm just going to go through this quick. I don't want to keep you guys too long. So you might not realize it, but embroidery floss comes with 6 ends. So there's 6 different little threads within the skein. So when you pull off your piece, you can separate those 6 threads into, I use 3. I generally use 3 ends, and it just gives you twice as much yardage for your money. So I separated it off into 3, and I have my needle threaded here. And before I thread my needle, I wax my thread. So I have beeswax here, and I'll show you just quickly how that's done. So you just want to wind off the length of thread that you're going to be using, and you're just going to hold, this is the beeswax cake, again, available in my shop. You're going to hold the thread on the beeswax and just pull it the length of the beeswax. I usually go 3 times. And the old school kind of fun name for this activity is loving your thread. So this is how the old ladies down in the South do their hand quilting. They love their thread and they use beeswax. And then you're just going to knot the long side of your thread, okay, and let the short side be short. You want to have it long enough so it doesn't pull out. And you're going to pin your stack of fabric in the corners, okay. And then to start with, we're going to, actually there's one more little piece that I just need to grab. I think I have it here underneath stuff. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to make a little hanger for my pot holder because I like to be able to hang. I have a little place in my kitchen where I like to hang them so they're always accessible but not underfoot, so to speak. So I'm going to cut a little piece of fabric. I think it's 1 inch by 4.5 inches, and I'm going to stretch that. And if this is made from a piece of t-shirt, so it curls right up, which is perfect for a hanger. I'm going to fold it in half, and I'm actually going to pin that inside the corner. Okay, so it's hard for me to show you how to do this. I kind of need 2 hands. I'm going to work right on the surface of my table so that I can pin that in, and I'll show you in just a second. One of the things I haven't mentioned in a while is that I live in a very rural area, and our connectivity is a little shaky, so it's hard. Like, I can do this kind of video, but it's really hard for me to do a video that I need to download and then upload. Okay, so there's my little hanger. Okay, then I'm going to take my threaded needle, and I'm going to do the stitch that if you've been watching for a little while, this might be a familiar stitch to you. It's called a blanket stitch, and I use it for edging a lot of different materials. This stitch will kind of lock your edges so that it's almost like a hand done serging stitch. So I'm going to start with my needle, with my knot inside the layer. So there's my knot next to my finger there. You see it, little green knot there. And then I pulled the thread through so that that's just kind of concealed right inside. Okay, and my first stitch, I'm going to go right back in, right next to where I came out. So let me just poke this through and then I can show you. Okay, so I'm creating a loop. And I'm starting in the corner, just next to the loop. I don't know why, it just seems like the right place to start. It's a nice place to start and finish. So I'm going to make a loop, and I'm going to poke my needle through that loop when it comes down close to the surface and pull that out there. So now if I look closely, my thread is coming right off the cut edge of the fabric. Do you see how that is? Okay. Now I'm going to start, and I'm going to see if I can do this so you can see it. It's a little tricky with my slightly dyslexic mind, but here's my needle. It's going in right, let me see if I can get the light on it. See how it goes in? It's about a 1/2 inch from the last stitch. And I'm going to pull that out to the edge. So it's making kind of like this wrapped blanket stitch. And if you hold your thread right, you don't really need to stick it through separately. You're going to catch it as you go kind of thing. It's almost like hemming, if you guys are familiar with how to hem like a pair of pants or a skirt. I'm going to flip this over because I think it's going to be easier for you to see, not on that dark fabric. Do you see how that's working? Okay, so I'm just going to stitch all the way around the 4 corners of my pot holder with the same technique, and I'm gonna do this while we're chatting so I can show you how to turn a corner. And I just want you to know, like, I did not invent this process. This is ancient. So there's all different ways that you can, this is one way of making sure that your cut raw edges are kind of protected and will withstand the use of a pot holder. There's tons of other ways of doing it as well. So if you have a different technique, that's just fine. And the other thing that to keep in mind is, like, my stitches are, I think they're about 3/8, 1/2 inch apart. You can do, stitching is kind of like knitting, that some people stitch or knit in a tight way, some people are a little bit more loose, and it's just whatever works for your kind of pleasure is the way you should be doing it. Because the thing that I think is really important about this whole process is that we enjoy it, right? Like, the most important thing you can do with your day is to enjoy most of it, right? There's always going to be things that come up in your day that are not enjoyable, but if your first priority is to have a good day and enjoy yourself, the chances of that happening seem to be greater. Sorry, I'm holding this right off of camera and you can't even see what I'm doing. Okay, so do you see those stitches? Okay, cool. Now I want to see, please bear with the interruptions of the live video. Oh, okay, cool. So Carolyn is posting. Carolyn helps me so much with these live sessions. Thank you so much for that, Carolyn. Yeah, sometimes it's really hard. And if you just kind of keep rolling, the video will come back if you're having connectivity issues. I'm just going to stitch this kind of quickly so that I can show you the corner. And for me to do it quickly, I just have to kind of look at it. Does anybody have any questions, ideas, thoughts? There's a couple things I want to share with you guys while I'm doing this. 2 things. One is that I'm super excited about the stitch along. Have you guys been paying attention to that at all? If you're new here and you're just hearing this term for the first time ever, you're probably wondering, what in the heck is a stitch along? So a few weeks ago, actually it's been a couple months now, I kicked off this new project that is really super empowering and successful, and that is called a stitch along. And it's I've been working on a blog post for longer than I'd like to admit that has a lot of detail about how it all came together. But basically the gist of it is that myself and over 30 other women who purchased kits from me made this big, beautiful blanket with the kits, and I have a couple of samples. So this is a sample of the squares that we made, and it's all recycled. So like the background materials from a recycled blanket, the hearts are from different pieces of clothing, the little leaves are from they're cut out of cashmere sweaters. There's a little silk dot up here from some thrift store score I found that's 100% silk. And each person made a square, and then we had, to make the squares, I had 3 live sewing circles where I taught the whole process of how, where to start, how to do the square from start to finish. And we had a little private Facebook group, and we made these squares. And the deal was that when people were done with the square, they would send them back to me to make into this amazing blanket. And, you know, I thought, oh, this is going to be fun. When I can't even tell you guys like how, like my mind is blown. Like people have just made the most beautiful squares, and every single one is different. Every single one has a little piece of that person who made its kind of individuality in it. And I got every single square back, like 100% participation. Like, does that happen? It does. I can tell you that it does. I was blown away. Like, just thank you for all the people who participated in that. Like, just talk about humanity and how awesome people can be. Like, this is a really great example of it. So I put those squares together into this beautiful blanket. The kind of body of the blanket was made from this, just the most gorgeous wool, like spongy, beautiful fabric that was donated. While I was in my design process, I was really trying to figure out, like, how am I going to make this blanket so beautiful? I don't have the materials I was wishing for. And sure enough, that very day, 2 boxes of the most beautiful donation wool came to my doorstep from a woman I've never met. And in the bottom of the second box was this piece of wool that was exactly the right size for that blanket. Like I didn't have to cut it. The universe is beautiful and magical. So this week, and I think it's going to be Friday, we're having a little bit of like glitchy stuff going on with the technology that we're using to make this happen. That blanket that we made as a collaborative will be auctioned off from my website, and all the profits from that blanket will be donated to our local shelter for those suffering from domestic violence. So all the women who participated in that were so thankful to have an opportunity to serve the most vulnerable people in our midst. And it's just been a really meaningful process to me, and I think to most of the people who have participated. And the Elizabeth Freeman Center is the name of our local shelter where that donation will be made. So keep an eye out for that. I'll definitely talk more about it on my live sessions, but I'm going to do a little unveiling of that beautiful blanket. And there's going to be another stitch along because it's just been a great win-win-win situation. So if you're interested in participating in the next one, hop on my email list over at my website, and you can. I'll send an email out in the next couple of days so we can make sure that we have you on the list. Okay, thanks for listening to that. Here we are. I got my stitches done, so I'm out to the corner right here, and do you see my needle there? So this is my last stitch, and I was working from the other side. So I'm going to go back over. So see my stitch right here? Hold on, let me hold it so you can see it. So my last stitch comes back here. So I'm going to go back over, and I'm going to stitch right in where I came out. And I'm going to come back to the side where I was working. Okay, and actually now I feel, yeah, there you can see it. Okay, so now I'm going to do another stitch, kind of like the first stitch I did with that loop. I'm going to go right back in, very close to where I came out, and I'm going to make that loop again. Do you remember? And I'm going to put the needle through that loop, and I'm going to turn it so that it's going to perpendicular to the first edge that we worked, and kind of tug it a little to snug it up. And then I'm going to work on this edge, and I'm going to just work across to the next corner. Does that make sense? Cool. So that is how you're going to do it. You're going to work your corners just that way, and I'm going to hold it up to the camera so you can really see how it looks. Hold on, I just have to make it look perfect so you can really clearly understand it. So there's that side, and then here's this side. There we go. Okay. So when I get to the next corner, I'm going to make the same stitch again. I'm going to do that again here the third time, and then I'm going to stitch right back up to the loop that I inserted there. And to end it, I'm going to end it the same way as I turn the corner. So I'm going to stitch back into the first where I came out, and I'm going to make a knot right close to the surface of the fabric and stick my end between the layers, coming out a couple inches from where that goes in and snipping right at the surface of the fabric so I don't have any knots hanging out that could possibly come undone. I will show you the finished potholder tomorrow, live at 11. I'll be back then, and I will be here every day live at 11 until August 11th. I don't know how that worked out, 11, 11, 11. Great, so today is Monday, and I hope that this day is kicking off a really great week where you have lots of positive